Good evening, everybody. And I will apologize in advance for the coughing that I will try to keep holding back here. As we'll call this the COVID-19 edition of eMLB SportsNet. We got a special treat for you here in a moment on the other side once we get ourselves underway. Been 2 weeks since we streamed. It's officially going to be our first stream of the off-season free agency. Beer and baseball, I wish I could say that tonight. Tonight's edition of the show is going to be completely sponsored by Hall's Breezers because holy crap, my throat hates me right now. You're like the old lady in the Titanic. It's been 84 years, Tim. Well, it feels like that for me. But I got some people raring to go.
Let's go while we're young.
So I think we should just get this thing started. You know what I mean? Who needs soda when you have Dayquil? Yes. Well, okay. Well, you have the booze. Be my guest. Have one for me, too. Let's go.
Welcome. Come in. Fresh victims for my ever-growing army of the undead.
Sir, you have to let go of the button.
Well, son of a bitch.
Welcome to a very special edition of eMLB SportsNet. It is the, holy crap, who are all these guys kind of edition of the show. I think you happen to know all these guys. They have their own shows. Normally you see them just exclusively here on YouTube, but today we are going fancy. We are bringing in the cast of the eMLB Insider Podcast, which is Jared Rollins, our Cincinnati Reds GM, and of course, Senior Director of Communications for the real-life Cincinnati Reds. Name drop, shout out. So, gotta start doing that more and more here. We've got, of course, Andrew Alexander of the St. Louis Cardinals. Then, of course, can't leave these guys out. The innovators of dropping Chara Bunny, comments on their show. Aiden Pearson, Brendan McGurk. Aiden, of course, our Braves GM. Brendan, our Orioles GM from the Here's Why You're Wrong show. Brady Bunch? I don't know about that. More like an eclectic group of people. We're going to have some fun tonight. Guys, how are we all doing today?
Doing great and good to be back.
Good.
Real good.
Good.
It's nice to be back in the recording space of eMLB.
Yes, indeed. Good. So here's what we've got on tap for our show. It's the start of the 2026 season, getting ready with off-season action, getting ready to get started officially here. So we've got a few things to talk about there. We're going to do very quickly. We're going to give a quick announcement. This is going to be done more, excuse me, there's that cough. We're going to do an announcement later in the Discord. You know, it's that kind of time of year. The eMLB charity Streamathon that will focus the Fluffy Kitty Ninjas charity Streamathon, I should call it. It'll be the third annual that we do. This will be the first one we do as a partner. We really look forward to it. It will be right now tentatively August 13th. We're just waiting for confirmation from Dana-Farber Cancer Institute that will be a good weekend to do it. That Saturday is when I will do the most of what I have planned. But again, we're looking at most likely doing anything from a Thursday to Sunday event for those who are looking to join in with us that particular year. So we'll talk more about that. Any subs that have taken place, first things first, I want to say thanks to all of you who had subbed again since coming back. We started with, with Anju. He's feeling 22 because that's how many month subs that he's done now. Thank you, Andrew. Raise Rules 15, baby. Thank you, Aiden. Appreciate that. Denbrew got the hype train started with a 17-month sub. And then Statsmonger also joined us with a 7-month sub. Thank you, Stats. And finally, a tier 3 sub from Extreme, our good friend behind the future Martin Bradford, who I'm sure we're going to see in the majors fairly soon here. So, again, thanks to all of you. I have turned alerts off so that the guys can talk and have a good time. We are here to entertain you as Butcher just activates his Optimus Prime sub. Thank you very much, Butch. Appreciate that. We officially have a Twitch baby now. So, here's where we are. We've got a couple of trades we want to talk about, so I think that we should get started on them. I don't know which trade you guys might want to start with, but I think we'll go with the one that's already been announced, because the other one hasn't been announced yet, and it will be. So we'll talk about that one shortly. But let's talk about the one that did get announced earlier today that saw Jose Ramirez will find his way over to Kansas City, as somebody on this panel was a busy boy. So Joe Ram is heading back to the AL Central, and in return, and I hope that there will be a fair amount of chances to be able, I can't do it tonight, but the standard d'excellence, Jacques Landry, is heading over to Atlanta along with Kyle Hendricks, and prospect Jack Sellinger will be heading over to Atlanta on the deal. What do you think, guys? You think we should have Aiden speak last in this particular one? Let you guys have your moments? No,
put him on the stand first.
Okay.
Put him on the stand.
Let him explain himself.
All right. So in the immortal words of Ricky Ricardo, you got some splaining to do. So take the floor there, Aiden.
So first of all, it's great to be back. I appreciate every single one of you. And you know what? I'm going to give a special shout out to Minerva on this one, because this is I think the first deal that I fully worked out where it wasn't a whole lot of texting back and forth. One thing that I find a whole lot easier, at least on my end, is when Minerva and I, luckily enough, were able to hop in a Discord call actually and talk this out like on the phone, like real MLB GMs. So that was a really cool experience because we were able to bounce ideas off in real time off of each other. But the big thing for me was that I had a little budgetary problems, a little bit, not problems, but wanted to clear up a little more space for some other things that are in the works, you know, keep myself competitive and everything like that. And with an aging Jose Ramirez, his value was probably as high as it was going to be while he was with Atlanta, just based on his contract, his age, his production, and everything like that. And when I was approached about this deal, it gave me an opportunity to bring in a guy who I really like in Jacques Landry, who's got one of the best names in eMLB. He's a 1.0 legend, as well as a really good third baseman who I can have some control with to pair with the rest of my relatively young team. I was able to bring him in. The reason I brought in Kyle Hendricks in that deal was to make the money work out a little bit more, with Minerva being a little bit of a smaller budget team. And then a relief prospect in Sellinger, where he's sort of a lotto pick, and a lot of relief prospects in eMLB are. So for me, I feel like I capitalized on a value of a player while it was high, got back some salary relief as well as some really good talent as well. And Jacques Landry, you know, not having to have the spotlight on him or not having to be one of the best 1, 2, or 3 players in Atlanta, I think could really help him and continue to succeed the way he did last year and in previous years as well. Even though his home run numbers went down, I think he's going to play really well in Atlanta, with Freddie Freeman behind him, with Antonio Alvarez, with some of the other guys we're going to talk about a little bit later.
You know, you make a great point. His numbers are down in regards, as we got a graphic on him right now. His home run numbers might be down from 30 to 24, down to 13 this past year, but 14 triples. Oh my goodness. And he had a career high in slugging. He had a career high OPS. His WAR was at its highest. His OPS plus is at his highest. So it's not like he's gone the wrong direction. He's just kind of innovated in a different direction. At least that's what it was this past year. Does he benefit more moving over to Truist Field? playing in less of a primary role, which is exactly what you said. So it's not like he was sold low in this particular instance. He's going to be a very adequate replacement, and he's coming off of what is in essence a career year, just in the wrong stat. So it is an impressive year he still had if we look at the full body of work. So
and it's not a, for me, and I think a lot of people, home runs, yes, are important, but especially in today's day of baseball and in eMLB, for all the home run hitters we have, you need those guys to get on base in front of them to drive in more runs. And Jock Landry does that at a premium.
That was my team's problem. My team was near the top of the NL in home runs, but we didn't have anyone on base when we hit the home run, so we were 10th in runs scored.
Indeed. If Landry can continue to trend in the direction of improving his average, because this was also career high in his average, he's a career 242 hitter thus far. That will be, the big question mark for him. Is again, is he trending in the right direction? Is he figuring out the contact? He's an average. The history on him is he is an average hitter, but he can hit for better than singles, which is the real plus on him. So he gets back into the 20s and continues to hit the 40 homers, and even if he returns to his this season triples numbers, that's an impressive player that you're getting for a significantly lower price tag than Jose Ramirez is.
And not even to mention defensively, they're comparable. If not, Jock Landry might be a little bit better defensively as well. I
think you're right. I think Landry is the better pitcher better third baseman in regards to the whole sample on things. Not to knock Ramirez, because Ramirez is probably the more complete offensive player. Again, we've got 330 career home runs, 200 plus stolen bases. Hit 286 last year, and probably going to hit 2,000 hits in his career during his season, barring injury as well. So, I mean, a great player. You've got possible complementary players. Again, we all winced when we saw the deal for Kyle Hendricks originally. When he was signed last season, definitely bought at a very high number. To take a 4-year chance on a player like Hendricks where he is. I mean, he didn't pitch great. He didn't pitch even league average, but he pitched enough to help make a difference for a team that found its way into the postseason in kind of a Cinderella story.
And you also talked about Hendricks. I don't need him to be the ace of my staff here in Atlanta. I don't even need him to be 1, 2, or 3. If he can be a 4 or a 5 or even a long man reliever in the bullpen where he essentially has zero pressure on him, I think the leverage as well plays a factor into OOTP, where he's not asked to be the man, put the team on his back pitching wise. He could really bounce back in a park like Truist and in the National League where he's had a lot of success.
Indeed.
That's a very expensive long reliever.
It can be, but where he did for WAR still at 1.5 this season, he didn't pitch too. It wasn't like he was too overpriced that he still gave a level of production. But I would agree with Andrew that if that's all he does is, if he doesn't even pitch 100 innings in a season, that's a very expensive player to have for the role he'll most likely be in. JR, Brendan, any of you have a thought here?
Landry's an appreciating talent right now. He's gotten better every single year of his career, and I don't, with his age and his contract and how much he costs, I think that's a straight win for him. He could cut Hendricks and still win this deal.
Okay.
The thing with a guy like Hendricks is, you can get at least enough mileage out of a pitcher at that price. You can get, easily get 1.5 WAR, and it's really not, that much of a loss out of a guy eating some innings. The biggest question for me in this deal is I'd love to know, how much Minerva really valued Jose Ramirez, because to make this deal at this point in the off season, he has to really, really like Ramirez, because I know for sure, just from talking with our group and others, there were a lot of people who were interested in Landry. So, there were a lot of people who were asking about him to potentially be part of a deal. And I just feel like there had to be another bat that Minerva could have gone after that would be less of a financial commitment for Ramirez, and who, he did perform a whole lot better with Atlanta after coming over in the deal than he had for the, year and a half or so with Cleveland before then. But at $37 million a year for likely 5 more years, I mean, I can't imagine him not picking up the player option for those last two seasons. That is a whole lot of commitment to make, even if you feel like you have a window here for a couple of seasons to win, to a guy who, even at best is around, a 5 WAR player, which is still a lot, but you have to really feel like he's going to get at least that for you over the next couple of seasons to make this deal, even close to worthwhile.
And kind of going back to when he was traded to Atlanta, we did a podcast special on this where Aiden and I talked with Sadier about how we ended up in the 3-team trade because I was talking to Sadier about Jose Ramirez. And honestly, if you take the money out of the equation, I actually would have preferred to add Ramirez to my team than Acuna because he made more sense for my team at the time with third base and someone who gets on base a lot, which is someone I was looking for. But the money was where I was getting hung up. And when we made the deal, I ended up preferring Acuna because he was cheaper and he was younger. So that contract is the big question mark on this whole deal is, will that make it worth it for Kansas City? It's a good move to keep him in the race for next year and to repeat as AL Central champions. It definitely puts the pressure on the Tigers and the rest of the AL Central to keep up. But will that price for a Royals organization that is not one of the top budget teams, will that hinder them to make other moves that could make their team better?
I think fortunately for Minerva, he's in a point right now where he can kind of kick that can down the road. A lot of his top players are pre-arb right now or just now entering arbitration. This is going to be a problem in 2 years, but right now I think he can handle the salary.
I think the question is will he be able to take Jose Ramirez and, like I did, flip him if he's at a high level where he can add pieces back into it? For me, my original plan was always, and Andrew, I hate to say this to you and Sadier because I didn't say this coming out, but originally my plan was to take Ramirez and flip him after this season because I knew he was going to start declining at some point soon. And I knew if he had a good second half with Atlanta, I could capitalize on his value, which I feel like I did here because this was probably one of the best deals I could have gotten for him. And I'm shedding a lot of money space off my books over the next 5 years where I'm going to have some of my top prospects who are going to want to start getting paid.
I mean, I'm not offended by that at all. I told you I ended up with the player I wanted because he was cheaper and younger. So no offense taken at all.
I think though the one part of that is if you're Minerva though, you can't make this deal with the idea of you're going to look to flip him at some point. I think, if you're making a deal like this, you have to make it with the idea that you're adding a bat to your lineup to win over the next couple seasons. And you can't really think about the future on it because if you're doing that, then you should have waited to get a different bat that had less of a financial commitment. I mean, there's, this league, there's plenty of trading and wheeling and dealing that goes around where, and this is still so early in the off season, that there's still be plenty of time to add an impact bat if you feel like that's what your team needs to succeed. I just think, this is pretty early on to commit to that, a guy like with that contract and that risk.
You're muted, Commish.
You're muted, Commish.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm trying not to cough and all over you guys. So, and again, for those who don't know, I caught COVID-19 a week ago. So that's what I get for going on my first vacation in 6 years. But I guess I enjoyed it so much. I can already tell you guys, just pre-warning, mid-September, going back because I owe my wife the honeymoon and we're finally cashing in. So, but for now, this is tonight's sponsor, to put it very mildly. So, all right. So, final thoughts on this one as we wrap this particular trade up. It sounds like everyone feels long term that this is definitely advantage Atlanta, but if you get the Jose Ramirez that hit 33 home runs last year and 115 RBI, I think you're saying that he's definitely improved Kansas City short term.
Absolutely.
100%.
Okay.
I think so.
All right. Very good. So this one.
But before we move to that one,
Okay.
I want JR to talk about his trade that he made a few weeks ago before we went on break, where he added a certain reliever that is someone I know very well. Because I traded him a couple seasons ago.
Would we be talking about this specific deal where Jordan Hicks makes his way to Cincinnati?
Not only that, but a IRL Cardinal rookie sensation right now, Andre Palante, was in this deal as well. So I know both players in this deal. So I want to hear JR's reasoning behind this, considering it makes it seem like he's trying to contend in the NL Central. As the NL Central rival, I'm curious to see what I need to do to match what he's doing.
Yeah, so there's a couple components to this. Just to pull back the curtain a little bit, it started out with Steve really liking Palante. So that's where this started out with. He was looking to add a cheap starter for his squad for various reasons. And from my standpoint, when he posted his trade block with Hicks on there, I was interested because as I look ahead, I am looking to start, turning the ship around as we move over these next couple of seasons. I was kind of laying the groundwork this year with some guys coming up to the big leagues and kind of looking at starting to get into a window where some of these younger guys are up in the bigs, and combine with some players like Taylor Trammell, Jim Stone, that I've got a window here where I can get back into contention. And so part of that for me was starting to add some talent to win right now, but also, again, looking down the way that if needed, I could potentially be able to trade at some point to get some value back for, if that doesn't work out completely. Relief pitching, especially late inning closer types, people are always looking for at the deadline. So a guy like Hicks is somebody that I can plug in right now with the idea of trying to have a winning season this next year. And if things aren't looking in that direction, then I can always look to try to trade him there at the deadline without too much of a commitment. I wasn't crazy about giving up Palante at first, just knowing that he's a young, controllable starting pitching arm. That being said, I've got Christian Scott at AAA, who I really like as a ground ball guy with 3 really solid pitches that I think is ready to give a shot in the potentially in the rotation this year. There's Tyler Baum has pitched fairly well this past year. That I think again, he's got 3 solid pitches that may be able to eat up some innings for me and do something there. So I've got a couple guys that I think can mix in, and I've also got some money that I could potentially spend on a short-term option here in the off season as a free agent or picking up a contract that somebody would want to move. So that was kind of the thought process for me in going after Hicks there.
Only the guys on Zoom saw that Brendan was being attacked by a fluffy kitty ninja because I had it off camera at the time. So
that's what Aiden and I are trying to hold in our laughter right now.
We're like sitting here trying to hold it in. I'm trying.
All of a sudden, Brendan moves and we see a cat get moving. It's like, aha! Assassination attempt taking place midstream.
He's an antagonist.
Good stuff. So yeah, it was an interesting trade, but I like JR's thought process. You there he is again. You bring a guy in that has 5 straight seasons of 30 or more saves, and he did a sub-2 ERA this past year. And the advantage, assuming he accepts the deal, because I believe that second year of his is a player option, but it's a player option for less. So boy, wouldn't that be wonderful if he says, okay, I'll take it. You pretty much assume he's not, but hey, if someone wants to take the gamble, worst case scenario, then they try to see if they can extend him if they really want. So yeah, it's not a bad idea, but yeah, a little bit of a risk losing a player who looks pretty respectable in Milan. So all right, so no further hijackings of the plan here since Anju needed closure on that one. So, all right. So
I'm watching you, Jay.
Here's the excuse me. Here's the bomb dropper that we wanted to talk about. This one only got dropped on half of this chat, or half of this particular group of fine gentlemen, about 10 minutes before the show began. So this is going to be, first and foremost, as a couple of smirks are on your screen right now.
Yeah, because two of the people are on this call right now.
Yeah, so from the Here's Why You're Wrong department, here's, get ready to nitpick this trade. Here is the trade that is going to be announced. It hasn't been official in Discord, but it is going to be approved. Alex Verdugo. Where's Yuka? Is she in chat? Verdugo has been traded. Makes a World Series appearance. Gets his third batting title. Gets an MVP. And he gets traded to Atlanta. Verdugo, along with Steven Hajar and Juan Bracamonte, are on their way to Atlanta. Heading to Baltimore will be Jake Bowers, Gomer Townsend, Gene Hughes, and center fielder Enrique Bradfield. So, obviously, we have to start this one. Oh my God. Do we want the two parties involved to explain themselves, or do we want to be like, here's why you're wrong, guys?
I'd like to hear the instant reaction from the others.
Tell us why we're wrong.
Yeah, tell. Hold on. Don't tell Brendan why he's wrong, because we all know what side I feel like you guys are on. Tell me why I'm wrong.
I already told you what side I'm on. We were here post or pre-stream. I already told you what I thought. I this is what I literally said. I'm gonna say why Brendan is right and why Aiden is wrong. Aiden, I'm just gonna say this looks like the complete antithesis to the other trade you just made. You were talking about adding Jacques Landry because he's young, he's controllable, he's on the rise. And then you go and add someone like Verdugo, who's got 1 year left on his contract. He's definitely in the prime of his career, but he's not getting any better, not getting any younger. And you're going to have to shell out the money to extend him. Now you just freed up some money by moving J-Ram to do so. But when you were talking earlier about adding Jacques Landry because he was a young cornerstone for you, making this trade just kind of makes you go, what exactly are you doing then? Because Verdugo is not a young controllable guy. And I think Brendan made away like a bandit here because he added a couple of fantastic young pitching prospects to follow up behind Ethan Knight and Jim Reed, and a really good outfield prospect that is ready for the majors, that can step into center field and be ecstatic or very good defensively, which is something that the Orioles did not have last year, was fantastic defense. That was one of their weak points. And so just my initial gut reaction is Brendan has won this trade, and it doesn't really make sense for me from Atlanta's perspective.
I can't say I disagree all that much with anything Andrew just said. I mean, I love Brendan being able to turn Verdugo into Townsend and Hughes, and also getting a bat like Bowers that can kind of fill in, for what he's given up with Verdugo. I mean, I would have been tempted to keep Verdugo to make one more run at a World Series. I think maybe if Jim Reed's not hurt, that there's a little bit more chance that Brendan keeps Verdugo for that shot to go back to the World Series. I don't know. Again, I don't know if that played a role in your decision or not, but with the uncertainty of Reed, with a couple guys coming up on free agency in that rotation, having Townsend and Hughes that you could potentially plug in there in 2027 to replace one or more of those guys is great. And like Andrew, I just the two deals here for Atlanta really kind of throw me for a loop a little bit in terms of going a couple different ways.
All right, go ahead, defend yourself.
Go ahead, guys.
Brendan,
We'll start with Aiden.
Oh, we're starting with me. All right. Look, I understand the criticism of this deal. Don't get me wrong. It's a risk. This deal is a risk. But at the same time, how often do you get to add a MVP to your team for prospects that, in my opinion, based on the other prospects in my system, are expendable, are prospects that I have deep at those specific positions? So for me, it was, these are prospects that are going to struggle to make my major league roster right now, that why not flip them for capital, because they are still prospects. Flip them for an MVP guy who, by also trading Ramirez, I free up some money. He also is a huge, and when I say huge, I mean huge replacement over Bowers. He is a much better hitter, in my opinion, and I think he is going to provide in this lineup, protecting Freddie Freeman in this lineup. I think my team now, with my pitching back healthy again, is a World Series contender, and Pirate better be watching himself in the NL East.
Okay, but would you have had to make this deal if you didn't trade away Acuna?
But also Acuna wasn't playing as well for me. So for me,
okay, well that's true.
So for
he
me,
exploded in St. Louis.
He exploded in St. Louis, just like J-Ram exploded in Atlanta. So different parts do different things. I think Verdugo is going to play very well in Truist, and I think Verdugo is an MVP candidate in the same outfield as Antonio Alvarez and Christian Pache, as well as behind Freddie Freeman or in front of Freddie Freeman in that lineup. Jose Ramirez, Alex Verdugo, and Freddie Freeman in the same lineup, plus with Aiden Pearson coming up as well. That's a scary 4 hitters to face with one of the most elite rotations of arms in the eMLB top to bottom.
You said Jose
If they could stay
Ramirez. Don't
healthy.
you mean Jacques Landry? Because you traded.
When did I say?
You said Jose Ramirez, but you traded him, so you got
I
Jacques
meant-
Landry. So
No, I'm sorry. Yes,
I'm losing track.
Yes.
I meant Antonio.
He's made
I
too many
said
trades.
Jose Ramirez, thinking Antonio Alvarez in my head, because you see it. Aiden Pearson is now ready for the big leagues. You have, a guy like Johnny Burnitz who's ready for the big leagues as well. You have all these different guys who are ready in my farm system, and so were Hughes, so was Townsend, so was Bradfield. That I also have guys like Sauceda in my minors. I have a lot of pitching capital. That these are 2 guys that, when every day do you feel like you can come out well in a trade for an MVP?
So is it an MVP you're trying to extend? Or you want to keep
I
that
guess
one?
we'll have to wait and see.
Aha, yes. It did cost you, as far as I can tell, it cost you your 2 top pitching prospects that you have in Gomer Townsend and Gene Hughes. Hughes is a top 100 prospect. Townsend, I believe, was a top 150 prospect at last check. So it's. I know you feel that you have the depth, but you're definitely picking from the top end. Baltimore is definitely gaining players that have that potential, if they are ready this coming season, to be a suitable replacement for Reed while they lose him for the year.
And that's where OSA and my scout differ, because I have a certain evaluation on some of these players that I see it a little differently based on how they pitch, what their pitch mix is, how I like to use my pitchers. That for me, these are 2 of the guys. Well, yes, they're high rated prospects. For me, I have some other pitchers in my system that I like. Plus, I still have Fried and Soroka at the top of that rotation.
Got an interesting couple of comments. First off, Tim saying Verdugo next trade, over under is the All-Star break. Under. Next one was Extreme saying, how will this affect all this movement? How will this affect Atlanta's team chemistry? Have a worry about that at all with all the guys living out of their luggage?
I don't, because you look at their personality types. Every guy I've traded for has good personality types that fit the team chemistry of my system.
Okay. All right.
I've taken that into consideration because, honestly, I was worried about the same thing. But I think the guys I brought in, all of them are good character guys based on their character assessments, and all of them play well with at least 1 or 2 of my coaches that I have at my major league level. So all of them I brought in for reasons, and I looked deeply into these deals. I mean, Brennan can tell you, we talked about this for a week and a half.
About that.
I was doing my due diligence, and while other people may question my decision making here, I think for me, I'm putting together a World Series contender where prospects aren't going to help me win a World Series, and MVP will.
Do you really think you can put together a World Series contender for this year, though?
I do. I think I have the team, and in a wide open NL East, if you ask me, because to be completely honest with you, I think Pirate got lucky with key injuries on Brennan's team.
I think he's lucky that his bullpen didn't implode like we all thought it would.
I think so as well. And I think out of all the divisions, the NL East we saw was one of the most competitive with not a whole lot of a high win total. So I can make that up because I had some key injuries that hurt me last season where guys, in my opinion, are now back healthy. And even if I was to have some injuries, I now have the depth at these levels where my depth has improved because I haven't had to use too many of them. And also I have enough prospects in my system and enough money in my payroll to be able to make a move if I have to still.
Yep. So, Tim's reminding us Pirate has been to the World Series 3 out of 4 years. It's not all luck. So that's
especially given we didn't see a great season out of Juan Soto last year either.
Oh yeah. Juan Soto.
Yeah, it's all these CCPs that he's got putting up a bunch of WAR.
Yeah, it wasn't a perennial MVP year for Juan Soto like normal, and the cast around him is definitely getting better. So definitely have to keep an eye on that. Townsend Hughes, 27 wins between the both of them in AAA Gwinnett last year.
Don't tell me we're talking about pitcher wins here. Come on.
Well, I mean, it shows that they have the mileage or the ability to go that far enough in games and be factors. You don't get me wrong. You're not wrong there. But they show that they can be on the winning side. Of course, yes, it requires the guys around them. There is, what do they say? There's no, Kobe says it best, there's no I in team, but there is an ME in that mofo. So, yeah, so they still have to do their part. I do believe Townsend of the two was a little bit more of a below league average guy versus Hughes. If I remember right, I don't think either of them are real strikeout demons, but
neither one is. And personally, in Baltimore, if you look at our team numbers, we don't value strikeouts very much.
True.
Strikeouts. If you can pick between not giving up walks and striking guys out, I will value control every time.
Good deal. All right, so I think this one doesn't have to go too far into it. It sounds like the consensus of those not involved in this trade think that this is overwhelmingly in favor of Baltimore.
Now, this is not to discredit the player that Verdugo is. He is the MVP. He's the reigning MVP of the AL.
Yep.
So it's not to discredit what type of player it is. It just doesn't make sense for Atlanta. He's going to play well in Atlanta. There's no question about it. But was it the right move for Atlanta to make?
I think in out of the park, a lot of the times you're tempted to really shy away from rentals because you tend to look at the long view. Aiden has 5 legit pitching prospects in his starting rotation at AAA, and now he has 3, which is not a problem. You consider he has 5 good starters at the major league level. He will not have an outfield spot for Bradfield, and Bowers is not an expiring deal anyways. All of those players are great coming to me, and it's a fantastic return and the best return I was going to get. But this is a great return going back to Aiden as well because he gets an MVP and not giving up depth. Rentals are good.
He's got an MVP. I don't believe he's ever been offered a qualifying offer, so even if he makes his way to free agency, Aiden can slap that on him, get a draft pick. So there's plenty of ways for him to look at playing this as well. So
and if I may, real quick, with a conversation that's going to be happening soon on a Here's Why You're Wrong episode of the podcast, with the influx of CCP players into that, who knows how valuable that draft pick could be? It could turn into the next MVP. You know, it could turn into the next Danny Smith Jr., or it could turn into the next Mark Diggs, or it could turn into the next Jim Knight, Ethan Knight, or Jim Reed. So it could turn into...
I don't think you're going to get that kind of player at the end of the first round. You got to have the top 5 pick to get that kind of player.
But what do CCPs do for you? Plus, we also, who knows? I could get a guy who maybe isn't valued because they don't boost a whole lot in the early goings, and then decides to go off and boost themselves later. So for all I know, I could turn Alex Verdugo, an MVP, into another MVP. I could take him and trade him if I'm not doing well, or he can lead me to a World Series victory.
Or you could get someone who doesn't boost their player at all.
There are a bunch of factors, but I think at the end of the day, I also look at the future value that he brings me, and there's a lot of different ways he can value me in the future.
Very true. Very true. There's, I don't know. It'll be a fun one to watch. We're going to keep a close eye, obviously, especially on the moves that got done. I mean, I like most of the major players involved here. They're all going to have some form of impact, if not next season, in the following season for sure. And that's the game. It is a risk. And if you think you've got something, why not go for it? So bold moves on Aiden's part on both of those deals that have been announced. And for Baltimore, I think that they get a nice load for it. Kansas City takes the big gamble, thinking that they've got something to build on from last year. So, hey, that's why we're here, to play the game and hopefully have a lot of fun doing it as well. So, here's the main part of our show. It is free agency time. So it's time to talk a little bit as we take a perusal at some of the top players that are available. We'll start on the batting side of things. The first guy has kind of seen it around in a few places. The former Cub, the former Tiger, Ian Happ will be our first guy of discussion. So what we're going to kind of talk about here is where do you think the players that we'll be discussing, what do you think the role is that they will still play as they enter free agency? If you think that they are absolutely nuts asking for the kind of money that they are asking for. And in the end, I would love to hear where you guys think, who's the most likely players. And if you want, have some fun and say who you think actually is going to land them. So let's start with Ian Happ, and let me start with JR on that one.
Ian Happ, he is well known in real life in Reds country for being a Reds killer as a former University of Cincinnati Bearcat. Every time he comes to Great American Ballpark, he destroys the place. So it makes my stomach turn a little bit every time I hear his name. But that being said, he's definitely got some really high demands, and I don't know if that's a product of him feeling what his talent level is, or looking at the landscape of the free agency and not seeing a ton of kind of big bats out there that are available in free agency, and kind of looking to cash in on that. He's obviously a guy that has shown quite a bit of power in the past, not always necessarily hitting for average, but he can play around the outfield and give you a lot of power. For me, I kind of envision him. There's a couple teams in that NL East that I could see being teams that might be willing to go after him and pay that money. The Phillies and the Mets, both of those teams could really use some help offensively. And again, Aiden was referencing just how tightly packed that division was last year. And, I think either of those two teams in particular could see adding a bat of Happ's caliber, being a way to maybe help push them over the top a little bit to get into the postseason.
He's still a guy who's going to strike out an awful lot. He struck out 200 times in 24, 156 times this past year in 116 games played for the Tigers. 236 career home runs as we take a quick peek at his career numbers. He's a 232 hitter, 236 homers, 650 RBIs, just over 1,000 career hits. He absolutely can mash the ball, but that's the question is he still at a good point? 31. I don't think he's asking for ridiculously too much considering his recent train of production, but the question is, can he get it? And is anybody really looking to make him kind of the starter? So that's just my quick thoughts on it. But let's go over to Andrew. What's your thoughts on him?
So he's kind of one of your prototypical power threats, someone who doesn't hit for a really high average, but can hit a handful of home runs for you across the season. But what he does bring that not a lot of power hitters can bring is above average defense. And I think that is definitely valuable. I agree with JR in terms of the contract demands. I think he's more looking at the fact that he is probably considered the top free agent, period. Maybe, maybe not on the pitching side, but top free agent hitter And I think that's more of a factor than what he's actually valued at. I think if you put him into like maybe the class from last year, he's not demanding this much money. I think he's someone worth just under 20 million as opposed to the 24 that he's asking for. I think a team that might be interested in him is a team that looked to have talent in the outfield, but had injuries and underperforming players kind of hurt their season. That's the Houston Astros. I think the Astros could use not only an improved bat in left field, but also the improved defense that they currently have in left field would fit Happ very well, because you had left fielders Jordan Alvarez and Kyle Tucker over there who both put up below seasons that were below what was expected of them, and I just think Happ would give them not only a potential for more offensive output, but also improve that defense at the same time. You're muted.
Thought I hit the button, but I didn't. Aiden, what's your thoughts?
You know, Happ for me is a overpriced player for what he's going to bring to the table, at least for my liking. I think defensively he's solid. I think the fact that he's going to hit home runs is great. But as Brad Pitt said best, what does he not do? He doesn't get on base at a good clip. And I think especially in eMLB with all the power hitters we have, you need a guy to get on base, especially in some of these lineups. And I don't really know where exactly he fits in. And as much as I hate to say it, but maybe I love to say it at the same time, I think with the money Witt has freed up in Philadelphia, he fits in Philadelphia the best. I think that's his ideal landing spot. I also don't know what kind of value and production you're going to get from him over a long-term period based on the contract he's asking for. I don't know how many more years he has left in him per se, but I think he'd do well in Philadelphia, and I'd be scared to face him in that lineup in Philadelphia because he can go 1 for 4 with a 3-run homer, but he can also strike out 3 times in the same regard. But I think he's got Philadelphia written all over him if he's willing to not take as many years, maybe at a higher price tag.
I didn't know that a guy that hits 100 points over his average on OBP is the guy who doesn't get on base, but I love the Brad Pitt reference at least. He has averaged 70 walks over his last 3 seasons in the majors. He does strike out an awful lot. He might be that traditional 3-outcome type of player. He's still going to be useful. It is just a matter of whether or not he can bring the full picture overall of in how long. I mean, how long is he asking for?
I think the best thing about Happ, besides the fact that he hits homers, is he's a switch hitter. I think that helps him a lot. I honestly think that might improve his longevity just because he can hit from both sides of the plate. Where if you slot him into a DH role, let's say 3 years down the line, when his speed and defense declines, he'll still give you good production in that role.
True. And historically, the advantage for him being the switch hitter is he's still better against right-handers, which are still more predominant in the league than lefties. So you'll probably get to see him more often than not if he even gets relegated to a platoon role and still is on a strong side of this. So, all right, Brendan,
and I'd say a 12.4% walk rate is better than league average, so I'd say he gets on base well enough.
Yeah. Brendan, any final thoughts on Happ?
You know, I think that of all the players asking for star money in this free agent class, there's only one who really deserves it, and Happ is not it. I think he's gonna struggle to find a suitor. I know Witt is a good option because Philadelphia needs to add players and they have a lot of money to throw around. Andrew threw out Houston. Houston would be better off bringing back Cousins than they would be going after. I think it's Cousins. Yeah, Cousins. Then again, going after Happ. I struggle to think anyone's going to want to give that length of contract at that money to him.
Yeah, Dylan Cousins would be someone that we would generally talk about if we were trying to go through a full show, but we're going to probably only go on top players based on OSA ratings. But Dylan Cousins did hit 32 home runs last season for the Astros, so we might not talk about him, but Brendan, name dropping here on someone that's absolutely going to be noticed a lot here this free agency.
I think Happ plays a similar role to what Willy Adams did last year and sits in free agency till late March, early April, maybe even into mid-April. until a team maybe goes down with an injury or realize their offense isn't performing the way they want to, and they make a big splash on probably a 1-year prove-it deal for Happ, I think is more likely than seeing him sign something long-term.
I'd agree with that.
After the qualifying offer compensation goes away.
True. True.
Well, that doesn't go away till like the trade deadline. Or also,
I thought it was June.
Oh, maybe June. I don't know.
Very similar to what Anthony Rizzo did. Very similar to Anthony Rizzo, I think.
All
Or
right.
Brandon Belt last year.
Yeah, but
Brandon
Rizzo didn't prove it.
Rizzo did not prove it.
All righty. Let's move on. And we'll go from one switch hitter of a power style to another switch hitter of a speed style. Let's switch on over to second baseman Adalberto Mondesi. And you got a guy who was one steal short of 50 last year. Still brings it very much in a variety of fashion. This is a guy who absolutely is going to be looked at for what he can do as a table setter. Let's start with Anju on this one. Adalberto Mondesi, what do you think's going on with him, and where's he going?
I'm gonna have to think about where he's going, but what I see as a player is honestly a little bit more of a flexible defensively version of Billy Hamilton, someone who is super fast but just cannot really handle the bat very well. He handled it better earlier in his career, but this last season he walked under 4% of the time. And for someone with the speed that he has, I would want him to get on base a lot more often than he had. Now, again, I'm a defensive-minded guy, so I'm going to keep bringing it up. He brings very great defensive diversity. He can play second, third, and shortstop, and he's apparently learning first base as well, because with the new OOTP 23, you can see his potential rating at first base all the way up to 18 based on OSA. So he can play any infield position that you want him to, so that does bring a lot of flexibility. But is he... I struggle to think that he might be the type of player that is consistently starting in a lineup. He might be a very good bench player, but I don't think he gets on base enough to utilize the speed where you would want him to. In terms of where he could go, can you come back to me on that one? I need to like look at some of these teams. You need to come back to me on that one. I'm not sure where he might fit.
Okay, fair enough. Aiden, what's your thoughts on Mondesi?
Mondesi is probably the most, I don't know if intriguing is the right word, but he's the most interesting of the hitter free agents to me in this, because he does give speed, but as Andrew mentioned, that 4% walk rate for a guy who is, you would see as a prototypical leadoff hitter-esque with the speed he brings to the table. He doesn't strike me as a guy who deserves the money he is asking for. I think Andrew put it perfectly. He's a very good pinch runner and defensive replacement who you could start in a pinch, but I don't see him as your everyday starter at second base, at shortstop, at third base. He could fill in a pinch. In the event of an injury, he could fill in great. I just don't know that he should be as high level of a free agent as he is. I get OSA ratings, but I think Brendan has actually taught me a lot about this with the Here's Why You're Wrong podcast. Ratings aren't everything. You can't look just at ratings, especially in a game like OOTP. And so for me, I don't even know where he ends up. I think I'm in a similar boat to Andrew. He sort of is a guy who is puzzling to me. I think as of any spot, maybe he gets a reunion in Kansas City if he's going to take a little bit less money. I just think that sort of makes sense because that's the one piece of the game that I think Minerva lacks right now. But I think it's going to be another guy who sits there for a while and also, maybe not signed, even though he doesn't have any compensation till April, just because no one really sees him as a guy who they're going to need in their team because he's asking for as much money as he is.
Interesting. And good points in regards to you do have to look beyond the ratings. He did hit more than 100 points lower on his OPS this past year. He did have more or less a career year the prior year, 27 home runs, 72 stolen bases when he played for both the Astros and the Brewers. The average isn't far off from his career average. He's a 259 hitter. He hit 253 last year. But absolutely, he's not going to get on base to the levels. He fits that Brad Pitt mold that we were discussing prior. And he'll burn you when he does. But he would be more complete if he could get on base much more. And you probably got to think, for a guy who's now in his 30s, he's not going to change his tune or his theme very much and suddenly start walking 80 times a year. Brendan, thoughts?
You know, I think Mondesi's career, this last year was an awful year for him. It's one of the worst hitting years of his career. For his career, though, he's an about average hitter. And I think here's a case where player personality ratings really start to matter, because if you look at his player personality, he's a high grade guy. Based on the kind of year and the kind of player he is, I think most teams would be comfortable giving him a 10 to $12 million a year deal. But asking for 17 is just way too much, and I don't think anyone's going to want to shell that out for him. And I don't think he's going to end up on the team, at least not until the season starts.
So he'll be someone who's sitting on the sidelines, and you'll be just watching to see when his price tag starts to come down, is what it sounds like you think a fair amount of people are going to do in this particular instance.
And Commish, if I may hop in here as well, I wanted to throw out one other team as well. Even though they don't have a GM, maybe he needs to go to Coors Field and experience some of the Coors Field effect. I'm just saying, it would be a spot. They've got a lot of things going on right now, but a guy in Colorado like him, it may benefit his career for the better.
I mean, they only got like 6 hitters on the major league roster.
I was going to say, they only have like 6 or 7 hitters on their major league roster.
Or do they have a GM? No, to be continued. JR, final thoughts.
So the team I first thought of with Mondesi is actually has a GM on this call, and that's Baltimore. Knowing how much Brendan values infield defense with the way he constructs his pitching staff. He's a guy that, can play second base, can play short. We've talked about how versatile he is. To me, he seems like he could be a good fit with Baltimore, again, once his price tag goes down. So I'd agree with everybody. I just don't see anybody giving that price tag. Maybe if he was coming off the 4 WAR season that he had in 2024, that could be a little bit more likely. But it looks like, he really took a step back this year. But I could definitely see him being a fit in Baltimore, or, even a place like the White Sox or the Twins, a team that, is looking to kind of get some more veteran presence in their infield, somebody that could kind of, help fill in some spots where they don't, necessarily have, some star players in place in second base, third base, and some of those slots.
Dare I even say Pittsburgh as well, because Cody loves to find these guys in April and just sign them to deals and trade them at some point.
He's got a lot of infield talent, though. I don't think that's going to be someone he goes after. I think a team that could go after, if the price tag goes down, are the Mets. The Mets don't have a lot of middle infield depth. They do have a really good second baseman that's on their roster, but in terms of shortstop and third base, Mondesi could potentially fit well there.
And JR, I had thought about it. So you're on the nose on at least thinking. He just wants too long a deal.
Yeah, eight years as a 30-year-old.
Is that what he's asking for?
Yep,
Good
8 years, 17 a year.
Why are so many 30-plus-year-old players asking for 7 to 8 year contracts? This is not the first
because
person
Scott
to do
Boras is in eMLB.
or they see the Maury contract or the Suzuki contract.
Thanks, Tom.
Why not?
It for all of
Well,
us. I hope.
Okay,
I hope
he's
Tom
not completely to blame. I drove up the price on both of them. Just saying.
Still,
I was in on both of them until the very end.
In Tom's defense, I think the Maury deal came before he was the Angels GM.
It did.
He's saying that in the chat.
Tom just wants to remind you that Maury was not his fault. So.
I think I might have had more of an influence on that.
Oh, you did.
Yeah.
You did. It was a game of chicken that kept on going, and you got out at the right time. So
I got your back, Tom. Don't worry.
he has the money for it. Okay.
All right, let's transition now. We've talked to 2 switch hitters so far. Now let's go to an outfielder the left-hander who played for the Arizona Diamondbacks, Adam Hazley. Hazley definitely has fallen off from where he's been, but you've always thought he's got good versatility and good ability to be helpful. I just don't know if what we've seen from him in Arizona the last couple of seasons especially, if that's all that you're going to get from him now. So is this a guy who's really cost himself a good opportunity? Yeah, he's asking for 7 years as well, is what we're hearing on his agents. But I don't know. He's someone who you always look at him and you're like, he should be more than what he's shown you. So let's discuss that. I'll start with you, Aiden.
For me, he's intriguing again, but I don't know that he's going to give you a whole lot. I think for a guy who gives you only, 10 to 15 homers a year, gives you maybe 70 RBIs, his walk to strikeout ratio is nice, especially if you look back at 2023, 89 walks to 111 strikeouts. He'll run the bases relatively well, an 841 OPS that season, and a WAR of 3.8 in what was widely regarded as his best season. He'll give you some gap power, but for me, I think that he's one of those guys who is gonna be not get what he asked for, but he'll still sign somewhere. And I think that's somewhere, to me, I look at all the guys in these places and, what do they need? Where are they gonna end up? And to me, I think he looks like he could end up in Milwaukee. He's got the right player for the way he plays, and I think Milwaukee would suit him very well.
Okay. He's a good fielder. I mean, he's predominantly been a left fielder from what we have seen. He's not going to wow you if you put him in center. He definitely can hit for extra bases. He's consistently a mid-30s in the doubles department. And at Chase Field, he was averaging more than 5 triples a season here over his last 4 as well. So he's not a terrible player. Again, he was a 3+ WAR guy this prior year, but this last season definitely fell off from what we've been used to seeing. Didn't steal as many bases as he had done prior. So, I think he's devalued himself a bit with his recent performance, but whoever brings him in, you've got a guy that can be sneaky fast, is going to be extremely reliable in the outfield. Maybe he's not necessarily an everyday starter, but he could be an adequate 4th outfielder who could play 4 days a week still and be pretty respectable during that time, possibly. Just my quick thoughts on it as I hand the floor over to Brendan.
You know what? I think Hazley is one of the more intriguing players at the top of the OSA list because his contract demand isn't so high. And I think he's actually going to attract a lot of interest because while last year was a career worst year at the plate for him, he's a above average hitter for his career. He's a quality guy ratings wise. He's a quality hitter all around anyways. I think that he's going to attract a good deal of attention. I think that a team like Toronto could really use him, a team that's on the up and up. They can sign him to a long-term deal. It won't hurt their finances too badly. And I think he'd be a good ad for a team that's on the up and up.
A guy that we know has a lot of leadership quality as well. That never is a bad thing to think about. As the kitty is back, and
he's awful.
Not to mention too, out of the 3 players we've talked about, he's the youngest at 29 years old. He's still considered in his prime.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed. He is only 29. He'll turn 30 very early during the 26th season. So absolutely, you've got a guy who you've got to think his best days are still not behind him yet. Uh-oh, the kitty's in big trouble now. Brendan just took the camera. He says, all right, you're going to the other room. All right, let's transition over to JR. What's your thoughts? The cat won, says Tim.
Oh boy. So I think with Hazley, I think teams like the Mets and Phillies would make sense, kind of for the same reasons I mentioned them with Happ earlier. But I also think a team like the White Sox could be a good fit for him. he's got really good gap power. And I think, in a ballpark like the White Sox ballpark, a lot of those could turn into to home runs instead of doubles. And they definitely need, some help on offense and specifically in the outfield. They've got, some other good young bats that Josh is building there. And I could easily see him, factoring into that outfield there as well.
Good call. Andrew, what's your thoughts?
I agree a lot with what Brendan said about him. Probably, honestly, I think he might get more offers on the table than Happ does, because his demands are more reasonable, and he's still a valuable hitter, as well as if not average, a little bit above average defender. I think the most valuable part about him is one thing we said was not a trait of Mondesi, in that he can draw the walk. He walks above average, or I'd say above my baseline for average is above 10% in a walk rate. So I think that is very valuable, which he still maintained this year, despite the fact that his actual batting numbers went down. I also agree with Brendan on the fact that this could go to a team on the up and up, but I think it's a team that's a little bit more ready to compete than Toronto. I think he might go to, and this might upset Aaron, NL West rival in San Francisco. San Francisco has some needs in the outfield, and I think Hazley could fit well in that role.
That's a good call. That's a good call. I like that one. And
that ballpark would play really well with his gap power as well.
Exactly.
It would. I love Tim's quote that Brendan has already responded to. Just imagine your cat is the Tigers. You'll win 3 out of 4. So, ouch. Shots fired.
He already broke free of the jail I set up for him, so.
Too funny. All right, let's transition over to another second baseman. This one was from the Royals. I find this one is a peculiar one for me because he's definitely not a power threat. He's not necessarily a stolen base threat. He's just a little bit of everything, just enough to make himself very versatile and stuff. But let's talk Nikki Lopez from Kansas City, who now is a free agent. We'll start with Brendan on this one. What's your thoughts on Nikki?
9-year deal at 30 years old.
What in the world?
I think Nikki Lopez is a fine player. He's a fine player. He's a guy most teams go 8-10 million, you play second base or you utility infield, and we really like you. I struggle. I keep saying this for every single free agent because it's really how I feel about most of the class. I struggle to think anyone's going to want to pay him. I don't see him going anywhere. I can't imagine any team will give him that contract.
My initial thought is that Lopez is most likely going to have a high possibility of returning to KC unless KC says, you know what, Adalberto Mondesi might be a good alternative. Mondesi was kind of like, well, if they don't go after Lopez, maybe they go after Mondesi so that they can add a little bit of speed, either at the top or the bottom of the lineup. I think they got better options at the top. And Mondesi, we've proven, is more of a bottom kind of lineup guy, but a very big threat. So, yeah, just my 2 cents real quickly on that one.
I'd agree with that.
JR, what's your thoughts on Lopez?
Yeah, he's another guy to me. I don't know that there's enough about him that sticks out as a big strength that it's going to get people too hot on his trail, early on in the free agency market. I could see a team like the Cubs. They don't necessarily have much in the way of a second base. Right now, I mean, they have a lot of young talent on that team. But second base is a spot where, maybe you plug in a veteran there for a little while and let them kind of, fill in until they get one of their prospects up there. Again, a team like the Twins, are another team to me that, if they want to, kind of, sign maybe somebody to a relatively short-term deal to kind of help get that ship, turned around a little bit. I just don't see him as a real big difference maker for anybody. So it's kind of like, looking at looking at some of the teams that maybe just want to fill that hole with somebody that maybe is a little more experienced, can kind of help round out a lineup a little bit. And I think that's going to be a little bit of a waiting game.
Sounds like you don't think he's going to get 9 years anywhere.
I would be shocked if he plays 9 more years.
I think you're probably right there. So, Anju, what's your thoughts?
I mean, kind of along the same lines. It's just like, what are these contract demands, and is it only because it's a relatively weak free agent market comparatively when you talk about the hitters that we've got? He reminds me of a player that I have in St. Louis in shortstop, Tony Sawyer, a guy with really good defense and someone who doesn't really strike out a lot, but doesn't really have a bat to speak of when he does make contact. It's more like make contact just enough to not strike out kind of thing. The thing is, though, is that Sawyer is a lot better defensively, and I don't think Lopez is really good defensively, but it's going to be hard to find a spot for him to stick. I don't think he's going to get the contract he demands, money-wise or years-wise. I think like these guys have said, it's going to be somewhere as a stopgap until someone better comes along. I see some team like potentially who was I looking at? I had someone in mind. Oh, he's on this call. Baltimore could potentially look at him, kind of similar to looking at Mondesi. Someone like
Medrano slander continues.
What's that?
So the Medrano slander continues.
I could also see him going to a team that is kind of on like a rebuilding phase as like another stopgap if the price goes down, something like Toronto or Minnesota. But I don't think he's gonna. I feel like when it comes to the free agent market as a whole, we are not going to see a lot of hitters signed early on. We're especially not the top ones that are rated by OSA. We're going to see a lot of wait and see if demands go down from the hitters. We're going to see the most action out of the pitchers whenever we get to talk to those.
Inquiring minds do want to know if there's any confirmation that Tony Medrano is spending this offseason in a fetal position in a dark corner, sucking his thumb, contemplating life with all those defensive miscues he had in the postseason. So
he's in the bad room.
Is he in the jail with the cat?
Hey,
he would have gotten out of that already.
as long as he's not hanging with Mrs. Machado, I think we're fine.
Indeed.
Well,
indeed.
He did slide into her DMs, so we're waiting.
Okay, we're gonna have to save that one for another show. Aiden, any final thoughts on Nikki Lopez?
Jack of all trades, master of none. I like what he brings to the table. He reminds me a lot of Taylor Walls in who I have, with similar versatility. Taylor Walls, just in my opinion, being a little better. I think he goes to more of a rebuilding team, and I have 3 teams in mind, actually. I think Oakland, I think Miami, and I think Cleveland. Those are 3 spots where I could see him ending up in any of those 3 spots. He can sort of be the man in 2 of those spots, or be the guy and be a stopgap until they're ready to compete, until some more better players are ready in that spot. I don't think he signs for more than 3 years, however, wherever he signs.
Okay. All right. This one will be an interesting one because he's probably one of the older guys that is in the group, and we saw him a fair amount here recently. The baby Giraffe, the 37-year-old Brandon Belt, who we saw, of course, in World Series play for the Orioles, 2-time Gold Glover, hit 15 home runs last season, 31 the prior year with Cleveland. He's still got game. So the question is, where do you think his game goes to? Let's start with JR.
Yeah, this is another interesting one. I mean, again, he's 37. You just have to wonder how much he's got left in the tank there. And first base is a spot where you're really expecting to get a lot of offense out of your first baseman. And Brandon Belt is not going to give you a lot of offense at this point in his career. So, the 2 teams that I had kind of looked at were maybe Milwaukee, maybe Toronto, as teams that kind of had a hole there in that spot. I know Milwaukee has been trying to find a place for Wander Javier, and they've been trying to train him there. And he's obviously got much more of a future there than Brandon Belt would have. But Belt could be a guy that they have in there as a veteran presence, a guy that could fill in some at bats there for a team that still is kind of a little bit in contention. Jason has a squad there that probably can compete this year with a couple moves, or he could kind of steer it more toward a rebuild. So Belt's a guy that maybe you can bring in there that can hold things down, or maybe be just a temporary bat there in between the two cases. So those are the two kind of spots I had thought of. I think it's going to be a challenge finding a spot for him, and he very well could go the entire offseason and not get signed.
Well, he didn't get signed in the last offseason, as Brendan had signed him in early mid-April, if I remember correctly. It was during the season.
Games had gone by.
Yeah, the season had already started. So you may be very right that it might be a let's see how we get through both Winter League as well as through spring training, and if any injuries come up, this might be a guy who ends up getting picked up, kind of like how Anthony Rizzo was in this past season as well in eMLB. So, all right, Anju, what's your thoughts?
I mean, you kind of made the comparison that I was going to make. I'm going to kind of compare him to what happened with Rizzo. The value that he gave the Orioles was not necessarily out of his power numbers, because obviously that has declined. About half as many home runs this year than he did the year before, if I recall correctly. But he got on base quite a bit. He walked at a very high rate, and that was one of the strengths of the Baltimore offense, was the ability to get on base. I think that with his age, I do think it kind of goes along the same route as happened to him last year, where he's not going to be signed until we're into the season. But I think a team that kind of employed this little sign players late strategy last year might have an eye on him, and that might be Pittsburgh. They tried it with Rizzo last year. It didn't quite work out. Rizzo tried to go to the Cardinals as well. Didn't work out, but Belt might be a better option, because not only does he get on base, he does have a Gold Glove to his name, or a couple, I think.
He does.
So that adds a value to a team looking to add someone who is potentially an on-base product. But yeah, his power numbers have gone down, which is not something you would typically want out of your first base spot. But he does get on base enough where you can probably stomach some of that.
Great, good stuff. Aiden, what's your thoughts on the baby Giraffe?
I think everyone's hit the nail on the head, and you know what? I'm not even going to analyze him as a player, because I think we would be beating a dead horse at this point, or a dead giraffe, should I say, at this point. But I think he ends up on a rebuilding team, and I think he heads to the concrete jungle and goes to the evil empire, just because they've talked about rebuilding over there, making his team get a veteran who maybe could have some fun with the short porch.
I was about to say that left-handed batter might rediscover his power there.
He might.
I don't think that's the worst spot for him to end up, and maybe it might give the AL East a little scare to at least me as an AL East fan in real life, knowing the Yankees are non-existent, no offense, in eMLB as far as competing for World Series titles, makes me really happy.
It doesn't hurt, too, that when you think of New York, you don't think of price being an object, and we've heard that Belt's demands are fairly high, so that might be a good fit, and it's just a matter of how long you sign him, because I don't know if anybody, we've heard 5 years, so apparently he's trying to go the Julio Franco route that Hebrew Hammer referenced. He's got plenty of time. Franco was playing professionally until his 50s. I don't know if Belt's trying to do that, but could be interesting there. So, Brendan, you want to add anything further before we move on?
I say Belt is a speed threat. Remember, this is the guy who on Game of the Night hit an inside the park home run. That's what you're getting when you sign him. Yankees, give him the 5-year, 22.4, invest the money.
That is the most expensive inside the park home run in history if he ends up doing that. And Tim says Belt will retire in out of the park 35. So and we've got plenty of time for his career. Let's move on. I think this one could be an interesting one, and he played a pivotal part in the World Series championship for the Nationals. Let's talk about the Speedster, Victor Robles, the human highlight film, as we love to call him, always getting the sexy play of the day, it seems. So Robles, I think, could be a really curious one because he's never really looked like he's going to be impressive to you offensively, but he has enough of everything else that he's maybe your bottom third, maybe your 7-hitter, maybe even your 8-hitter on a deeper squad. I mean, he was a 7-hitter predominantly for the Nationals, who's fairly deep. So Robles, I think, presents a real interesting challenge on where he ends up going myself in regards to that. So I think we're starting with Aju on this one. Where do you think Victor Robles goes?
So looking at Victor Robles, he was probably, just in my opinion, the first free agent that really caught my eye as someone I would have potentially wanted to add if I didn't have someone like Joe Adell already in center field. He would basically give me what Joe Adell is, an elite defensive player in center field at a position where you want defense to be a focus, and someone who can bring at least an average bat to the table. So I think demand for Robles is going to be high. I think Pirate wants to bring him back to Washington. I just think that his extension demands were a little high. Then that's why he couldn't stomach it before he hit free agency. So I think that might price him out of the running. So while Pirate would love to bring him back, I don't think he's going to be able to, because another team is going to be there to give him the demand that he's wanting, because this is going to be a high value target based purely off his defense alone. I think it might behoove someone like the Orioles to make a move now that they've got Verdugo off the list. Maybe they could spend the money for defensive center field. Maybe a team. I'm trying to think of, like, I feel like it's going to go to a higher contending team with more money to spend that has a need in center field. Well, the thing is, though, of the teams contending, there's not a lot of people that need center field. So it'll be interesting to see how the market develops.
Interesting. And one key thing to keep in mind, even if Pirate doesn't get him, if you think the activity is going to be in on him, it sounds like you think he'll be worth the pick that's going to be surrendered.
I do.
All right, very good. Aiden, what's your thoughts?
Victor Robles, to me, is the best free agent in this class. He brings the most to the table out of the hitters. I will say the best hitter in the class, pardon me. Allow me to rephrase myself there for a moment. There's definitely some pitching that's a little better. But he definitely brings the most in the form of defense and offense to the table. And there are two places, both on the West Coast, where I think he can end up. First one is Arizona. I think he could do really well there, play a good role, as well as help Aaron potentially try to dethrone the San Diego Padres, as she almost did there. The other spot to me is an interesting one that hasn't really been mentioned, and I think a lot of people don't pay a whole lot of attention to. But I think for me, he would look really good in Los Angeles in the form of the Angels. You got a 34-year-old or an aging Mike Trout who you could put in the outfield, allow Shohei Ohtani to DH, and put a speedster at the top of that lineup. That lineup could be even more deadly and run away with the AL East. And definitely, in my opinion, they were already a World Series contender. They could really be a World Series contender with Victor Robles' defense and speed in center field.
Wow, I like that call. That's a very interesting call. The question is Tom taking notes inside of the chat right now?
And is he really going to want to move Luis Ramos out of the DH spot? Because Ramos does not really give him much defensively as a first baseman. And I don't know if you want to risk going down defensively at first base to move Ohtani to DH.
First base defense ain't going to help you out if you can add in that plus in center field defense.
I mean, do you really need to when you have Trout already, though?
But according to OSA, he is a decent first baseman. I mean, Luis Ramos is not the end of the world. He is average, probably, But I think for the bat he brings in, you can afford to lose some of the defense at first base where you don't need a high defensive first baseman. And you also gain a whole lot of defense in Victor Robles that you're going to make up in DRS for what you may lose a little bit at first base.
If I'm the Angels, I would prefer to add more offense to maybe a corner outfield spot as opposed to more defense in center, because Trout is definitely above average as a defensive center fielder. That's just my opinion.
I think the one piece we might be forgetting too is there's Barry Allen, who's a AAA with the Angels, who can provide that great coverage in the outfield and center field. And I think, Tom thinks pretty highly of him. Otherwise, Aiden, I think you're spot on, and it would be a great way to kind of casually move Trout over and be able to add that defense there. I think I would just probably say that would probably be more of the reason that might be less likely to happen, is just the presence of Barry Allen there.
And before Brennan added Enrique Bradfield, I would have said Baltimore is a great spot for Robles.
Or 2-4.
That's fair. I forgot about that piece in the trade.
Bradfield and Robles to me are very similar players, that if Brennan, even though he says he's 4, if he didn't add Bradfield, he would have been a great land to go in that outfield in a very spacious Camden Yards.
I think though, Aiden, you were on the right track in terms of the West Coast, because I think the team that maybe fits best for him could be Seattle. The Mariners have a big ballpark as well. You stick Robles out there as a big upgrade over Reggie Allen, and all of a sudden you have him at the top of that lineup with all the mashers that Hetz has there. And I think that could be a really good fit for him. He's got some money coming off the books a little bit from what he retained with Chris Bryant. And I think, that could be a real good landing spot for him.
I think another team, we've mentioned them before, but I think this might be a great spot, and Pirate will hate this, Phillies. They've had Harrison Bader as a defensive stud in center field for the past couple seasons. He's now a free agent. What better person to replace him with than Robles?
You beat me to it, Andrew. I was saving it.
Or we talked about him earlier as well. Why not San Francisco in that spacious outfield?
Because they've got Dan King in center.
I think I don't disagree, but I also think that Robles and King in the same outfield, you can mix and match them, give people days off. That could be the best defensive outfield in all of baseball.
Yeah, you could move Dan to left. Like I mentioned earlier, I thought he was a good spot for Hazley because they had the left field need. So you could slide King over to left. That's the possibility.
All right. I think we covered a lot of ground here. It might be better to do this format for the rest of the show, since we probably have, I don't know, maybe I want to say a handful of batters that we want to look at, but we want to look at some pitchers as well. So any final thoughts on Robles before we move on?
I think that Chicago White Sox might shock some people by going after him.
Okay.
I don't know if they have the money to keep up.
They've
The
got
Phillies have more room to do so.
True.
Well, right now they currently got $100 million in committed payroll, and they've got $200 plus in available budget.
That's fair.
Yeah.
The White Sox are going to be competing in a couple of years.
All right, let's move on. Another middle infielder. This one, former Rocky Brendan Rodgers, 29-year-old. He had 18 home runs, 288 average. Not known for his speed. His defense has always been fairly adequate. More of a second baseman than a shortstop, at least in my eyes. But we'll start with Aiden here, and I guess I'll just let you guys kind of jump in further from there on your thoughts. What's your thoughts on Brendan?
Brendan Rodgers and the player right underneath him, in my opinion, are 1A, 1B in a sense of similarity of player. And for me, I don't exactly know what Brendan Rodgers brings to the table in a sense of except for the fact that he's 1 year younger and he gives you a little more power. According to OSA, high base running guy, but not a lot of speed. Is a very pull hitter as well. I think we have to see if it's the Coors Field effect that had any effect to him. I think the fact that last season he got on base at a very good clip at 833 and the season before that at 845, I think it brings a lot to the table. in my opinion. However, I think he ends up in Philadelphia. I think he's the prototypical Witt player, and at his price tag, it makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I think that Phillies are a good spot. You might see going maybe another Seattle potential, or maybe somewhere like maybe it's maybe he's someone who fits with the Royals as a replace, or maybe even as like a backup. I know they have Tony Bernazard a second, but what Rogers is kind of a weird thing to me. He doesn't strike me as like someone I can plug into a starting lineup right away. He definitely looks more like a second baseman than a shortstop. I don't know why OOTP lists him as a shortstop. He would fit on teams better as a second baseman, but I think his role is going to be as like a utilities backup second or third baseman. He might be another one of those guys that sits there for a while because he's one of those like Aiden mentioned earlier, a jack of all trades, master of none. He's decent in a lot of areas, but not really good in any one area.
I think he's a really good example of ratings aren't too friendly, but production is. Last 4 years, with the exception of 2023, he has been a well above average league hitter.
Yes,
True.
but he's in Colorado.
That's park adjusted for Coors.
Yep.
That's park adjusted.
Park adjusted. Okay.
He's, I mean, OPS plus 108 last year, OPS plus the year before that 122, 93 and 23, and then 25 and 22. I mean, he's well above average as a hitter, and that's park adjusted. I think that informs his ridiculous $25.8 million contract demand, which is the highest among hitters. And I think that's the only thing that's going to keep him out of a job. I actually think just based on him being a hitter, he's going to be one of the more attractive guys to go after for a team that wants to make an improvement to their lineup.
Right.
I think especially once the fan drops.
Yeah, I think as a second baseman too, that bat can provide some pretty good value and defense to where, you know, a team like say the Mets, who has money to spend, you know, they could overspend a little bit for him to kind of try to help bolster that lineup. Where, you know, some other teams who maybe, you know, have to be a little bit more careful with their money, you know, wouldn't necessarily go overboard for him.
Mets and Phillies make the most sense. It's just based on money and what they can bring to the table.
Though based on the contract he wants, I told Minerva that he has Kansas City Royal written all over him.
Oh, that's mean. I would say of those two teams, Phillies have a higher chance because the Mets have a young second baseman in Ransel Villeman, who's gonna stick there for a long time. Maybe Rogers fits in at third base there. That could be potential. But as a second baseman, that's not where the Mets are gonna go.
I think my biggest problem with Rogers is he's got 16 arms, but 16 arm, pardon me, but I don't know if his game translates to third base.
I think he's a perfect second baseman for the Phillies. They don't have anybody. They don't have anybody on the major league roster. They don't really have anybody in the farm. He'd be perfect. They got the money.
Okay. So this one will be fun. I mean, he's a Yankee, or was a Yankee, but Aaron Judge. This one, I'm curious because he still mashes. He just can't hit the ball. But 32 home runs last season. Where do you think Mr. Judge goes, especially when we hear he's really not asking for a lot to play?
I hope someone wasn't trying to like keep this under wraps, not necessarily just in the call, but in the league as a whole. But maybe he's a potential re-rate candidate. Potential? I mean, you see what he's doing in the league right now, IRL, and you have to think that a re-rate would even improve these ratings that we see under OSA. He is, in terms of what he's rated at right now, he is the prototypical all or nothing hitter. He's either going to hit a home run or he's going to strike out. Not sure where that translates into a team that might want him, but I think he might get interest for the fact that he could be a potential re-rate candidate.
He has got today's Joey, like real life Joey Gallo written all over him.
And this league's Joey Gallo.
And this league's Joey Gallo. But you know what? Because of his re-rate candidacy, I think Cody would just eat Aaron Judge up. Cody would love him some Aaron Judge.
I think Cody's going to try to find someone who's a lot more under the radar.
But,
I mean,
but
maybe
is
he
that
was under
Cody's
the radar
reverse
till now.
psychology?
I don't think
we
Judge was under the
exposed him. That's the point. Is he's like Cody? I can only imagine Cody is. We probably gave away his secret.
I mean, we're listing him as one of the top 10 free agents based on OSA rating, so I don't think he would have been considered under the radar.
And you know what? I'm gonna throw out a crazy team just for the potential of a really good bench bat and a potential re-rate guy. Hit the dropkick Murphys, ship him up to Boston.
Ooh, I could see
Yeah,
that.
can you imagine Judge on Boston, Commission?
I could see that, but oh boy, that's scary. That's scary.
I'm worried that the re-rate might not even help him too much because, correct me if I'm wrong, it will, like, since the player, he's so much older than real life, it will
Correct.
devalue it a little bit.
Yeah, he's 33,
Judge's
so
skill
he'll
set.
get a smaller increase, but you still benefit from the increase. So.
I think that the current OSA rating on his avoid K rating, I think that has the potential to shoot up quite a bit. I don't think his real life K rate is as bad as this is saying, as a 2 out of 20. Obviously, it's not going to be elite level, but it couldn't hurt to raise that up to maybe like a 5 to 8 range.
You know what I'm thinking is Aiden referenced Joey Gallo, and I don't necessarily know where Aaron Judge would sign, but how awesome would it be if somebody had both of them and used that as a platoon combo?
Oh my god.
I would like to say in real life right now, Andrew, by the way, he's currently this season has a 24.9% strikeout rate, so roughly 25%.
Okay, so that definitely is better than a 2 out of 20 rating.
Yeah. For sure. And
Well,
you
the
know what?
41.6 he did last
Hold on. We talk about Joey
Wow.
Gallo. Why not
41.6.
send Aaron Judge if you're not going to ship him up to Boston? Send him over to Texas to play with the fiddle in the band.
He has a lot of outfield depth there.
He does.
It might be DH potential, but
DH
I could
potential?
see DH in Texas if Jamie really wanted to.
now the thing about Judge is that he doesn't have to play DH. He can play a good outfield
can.
defensively.
He
I
can.
don't think he's fast enough for Jamie.
That's probably true.
What's his
that's
What's
where-
his
that's
speed
where
rating?
Mondesi's
Forget
gonna
it.
go.
You're out. You're out.
You know what? And I think, for Jamie out there, he can be a fourth outfielder / DH / pinch hit bat off the bench where Jamie sort of lacks that guy who can give you that. Or Kansas City maybe as an option because he's a Miguel Sano type.
I don't
Sorry,
think
Minerva.
Minerva's like Sano from the start.
I'm sorry,
He
Minerva.
can't hit.
All right, as I pop my third Hall's Breezer here, tonight's sponsor of the show for the COVID-19 edition. One more hitter I would like to talk about. I know someone here who has some fair thoughts on him. I think I've got it in me. I am Groot. Carlos Correa. What's going on with Correa, the Puerto Rican? Where do we think Correa goes? So let's start with the guy who had him, JR.
Yeah, Correa. I mean, he's shown a lot of power over these last two seasons. I tried to trade him at the trade deadline, and there was just not a whole lot of interest in him. Whether it be just being a rental or the amount of money that he had left over. So that didn't work out. He still plays a pretty decent defense at shortstop and at third. These days probably better third baseman than a shortstop.
And I was going to jump in and say, in fact, if you looked at his zone rating, he actually trends to be a pretty decent third baseman if he's ready to play the hot corner quite regularly. So might be better to look at Correa as who could really see him as an upgrade at third base.
Yeah, and I think he's one. I got him from the Mets a couple seasons ago. I could see him potentially being another guy that would go back to the Mets as a way to kind of help bolster that lineup. Cleveland was a team I thought might be an interesting landing spot for him. to come in there and kind of help, continue Sadie, you're turning that ship around. So, those are two spots that I kind of was looking at for him. Maybe even like the Rockies. Again, they're trying to rework a little bit, and that could be a guy that really could hit a lot of bombs out there in course.
I think for me, where he translates the most to right now is actually where he's at in real life. Minnesota, I think, is a perfect landing spot for him. They've got Royce Lewis at short, but you need a good third baseman there. He plays defensively well. Target field could be a good spot for him, and he's there in real life. Why not take a chance on him if you're GT? I think that could be a nice little spot for him, especially because he's not asking for a ton of money.
I'm going to mention a team that I had mentioned earlier as a team that's on the rise. I think that San Francisco might take a pass on Correa at third base. Currently their projected third baseman is Bryson Stott, who is not really anything special. So I think if you're looking at third base, you look at Correa very heavily. I will say this. I don't remember, JR, I don't remember if I talked to you about him or not, but I think I mentioned that if I didn't have Rendon, I would have been interested in Correa. So and it's also really hard to trade inside your own division because you don't want to play against the guys you trade away. But I mean, if I had a need for third base last season, I would have tried to trade for him. So he is definitely intriguing.
And I'll be honest, JR tried to trade him to me probably 4 times during last season. The conversation was definitely had a few times. And to be completely honest, if I traded Jose Ramirez, and even before I traded Jose Ramirez and didn't get Jacques Landry back, I was definitely interested in looking at him as a potential fit in Atlanta because he fit a good contract. And if any GM out there wants to take on Johan Camargo, my DMs are wide open.
Camargo's laughing to the bank every time he gets a paycheck from you guys.
Yeah.
Right. Not my deal. It was not signed when I was in charge. I would like that known.
True.
Fair.
Very true. Any further thoughts before we transition out of batters, and we'll talk a few pitchers? Probably not a huge amount, but we'll talk some pitchers here real quick.
Can I ask about one more hitter that we haven't talked about?
Okay.
I knew you were going to say that.
I just quickly want to hear everyone's thoughts on Willy Adams.
I knew that was the player.
Going to end up just because of what happened last year.
Remind us what happened last year. Refresh my memory.
Didn't he sit for a while?
He did.
Wasn't he another one of those guys who sat for a while before getting signed?
He did. Adames joined with the Rockies, I believe, mid-season, if I remember correctly.
331.
So
he signed at the end of the year and used kind of sparingly is how it worked for him.
Yeah, he was signed right after spring training and was sort of in there off and on. I would like to know where everyone thinks he could end up, just because for me, like I was mentioning earlier, him and Brendan Rodgers are one and the same, and you can get Adames for way cheaper.
Except Rodgers hits better. Ratings wise, they're very identical, but Rodgers has always played better. Park adjusted.
I will say this though, we mentioned like probably the top 2 landing spots for Rodgers was potentially the Phillies and the Mets. I think the Phillies get Brendan and the Mets get Adames because Adames can play a decent shortstop. With the fact that they have a prospect at second base for the Mets, Adames might be someone who's a little bit more intriguing to them. You would hope that his offensive numbers improve because Rodgers has definitely been the better hitter. Especially with Adames in Colorado, you would hope that he had better numbers. He only had 3 home runs over almost 400 plate appearances while he was in Colorado, so that's a little concerning. But I do think that he could provide enough value where the Mets take a chance on him if they don't have any better options at shortstop.
And I didn't realize this. His contract demands are very reasonable. He wants a 5-year deal for $45 million total.
Yeah,
and I think that 2 spots that I had in mind were, again, Minnesota, if they don't sign Correa, or send him back to his old stomping grounds in Tampa Bay. He could be a really good backup infielder at a cheap price for Charles over there in Tampa Bay.
I like that one. That could be very possible as well, too. So, All right, let's start talking some pitchers. We'll kind of speed this up a little bit, just as I see that Out of the Park has gone live, and go from there. So,
Who cares?
I know, right?
You don't have to worry about.
I don't have to
sending
worry
to
about
them
it anymore like I used to. You're right.
We're enjoying talking about baseball here.
We are. So, let's talk on what might be the top possible available starter. The left-hander, 32-year-old Fran Berbaldez, played with the Tigers last season, 13-8, 3.37 ERA. Definitely struck out at least the batter per inning. Valdez has always been peculiar to me. I always feel like he could be more than what he's panned out to be, but still, his numbers are very respectable. His whip the last two seasons has been significantly below league average. So, yeah, let's throw it out there. Let me see. I'll go backwards here. I'll start with Brendan on this one.
I mentioned at the very beginning that there was only one player who wanted star money that was worth it, and Fran Berbaldez is it. He is a great starting pitcher. He is a consistent starting pitcher. I think that he will be the most sought after player in this free agent class, and I think whatever team gets him is going to be getting a almost ace level contribution, like a really good number 2 starting pitcher. And I think he goes back to Detroit. I think Detroit wanted to keep him. They couldn't get a deal done last minute, and they're going to do everything they can to bring him back because they need him in their pitching staff.
They slap compensation on him, so that kind of gives them the tactical edge. If anybody really wants to go after him, they'll get a pick, worst case scenario, so it's not a complete loss. But that's a real good call. That might be possible.
I think they should have made the deal before he hit free agency, because I don't think Detroit's going to be able to keep up with the contract demand or the contract offers that are going to be out for Valdez. He is going to be highly sought after because this guy, not only does he get strikeouts, he gets ground balls at an elite rate. And that is very valuable for a lot of teams that play in those hitter friendly ballparks, like maybe Chicago White Sox, or maybe someone like, I don't know, maybe JR takes a pass at him at Great American Ballpark. I don't know. Might be too rich for his blood. I don't know. But this is going to be a guy that's going to get a lot of contract offers and might go to a high, a contending team that is looking to compete in for the World Series this year. Maybe something like Arizona, who might want to put someone alongside Bowers. That could be a potential landing spot, but this is going to be the prize of the free agent class right here.
Yeah, the team that immediately came to my mind, Andrew, was the Red Sox. Just knowing how much we talked last year about Boston, needing help with their starting pitching. They picked up for Syndergaard at the trade deadline, but I could really see Boston looking to add him, to really help that rotation. Or a team like the Angels, to really kind of put them over the top a little bit. They pretty much have the capital to spend on that. Or even a team like the Phillies, we've talked about them having money, and again, that ballpark, a top-notch pitcher who can keep the ball on the ground could be really, really valuable and make a difference in that NL East race.
Another team that I thought of, and I don't want to say it because it's the team that beat me out this year. I think the Cubs might make a pass here. The starting pitching to the Cubs might have been one of their weaker points, especially when they had injuries late in the season. They might want to go. I have a feeling that the Cubs are going to make a lot of moves this offseason in terms of free agency because their window is suddenly wide open. And so if you can get someone like Valdez to add to that rotation, which they have a very strong lineup. If you get a good pitching core, they could definitely be a World Series contender.
If you ask me, he's got 3 teams written all over him. He's got the Los Angeles Dodgers, he's got the Milwaukee Brewers, and he's got the Philadelphia Phillies written all over him, as much as I hate to say that as the Atlanta Braves GM. Phillies got money. They need an ace. Fran Berbaldez welcome to Philadelphia. I hope you hate the media as much as they're gonna hate you.
Yeah, he's not doesn't that, and that's the one downside with Valdez is his personalities, the personality traits.
Yeah.
But his performance kind of.
I think you can put up with a bad personality if they play well. Verdugo, I mean, he's still he's a desirable player despite literally being a trash person in game. I don't know how he is in real life.
He's all right. As far as I recall. As far as I can recall, he's all right. So, all right. So I was not sure which. I'm going to cheat a little bit here and go to a guy who's had a track record the last couple of seasons in Texas. Let's transition over to the guy who technically is from Guam. Sean Reid Foley had two straight sub-4 ERA years with 30 starts for the Rangers. Pitched better than league average with the whip. He's not the first name that you think of for dominance at all, but he really served a purpose for the Rangers here the past couple of seasons. So he's one that I'm very curious where he ends up going. Does he go back to Texas, or is someone going to take a flyer on him with the success he had there? Let's start with Aiden.
I think that his personality traits are absolutely terrible. I think that's going to hold him back a lot in this. I don't think we talk about what OOTP brings in the form of personality traits enough. However, I think that even though with all of that, he's going to end up in the big market. I think if you take him and you put him somewhere maybe like Chicago as far as the Cubbies, or you take him and put him in a rotation with Jofran Escalona in the New York Mets, where he doesn't have to be the guy, he can be the 3 or the 4 in that rotation. The Mets could be a really scary team if they could add a pitcher like that.
Indeed, that's a really good call there. He'd be a great compliment to Escalona.
Yeah.
Other thoughts from any of the established panel?
I don't think he might not get what he's asking for. He's asking for $15 million per year. I think at this point in his career, he's going to maybe get something around the 10 to 12 range. For me personally, as someone who does not get a ton of ground balls, he doesn't. This is just my personally. If you give up more fly balls than ground balls, I hope you have a high strikeout rate. That's just my personal opinion, and he really doesn't have a high enough strikeout rate for me.
No, he doesn't.
For someone like me personally, I'm probably not going to take a pass on Reid Foley because of that specifically. That just doesn't sound very attractive to me. Now, he does keep his ERA is respectable. So he does keep his runs down. He's been around the high 3s, low 4s for most of his career. So that is still really valuable. It's just like something just doesn't seem right. Something seems a little off, but he would definitely be something like a back end of the rotation. I don't think it would be worth $15 million though.
I think he's just a quality arm. He's a quality arm who, and quality starters are always going to be in high demand. I think he'll get the demand he's asking for just because he has a track record of not blowing it. He pitches average. He does average things, and he holds down a rotation spot, and he pitches a lot of innings.
He's dependable, but he's not going to give you all-star stuff.
I mean, a contending team would take him as their 5th starter, happily, 4th or 5th.
This is a guy the last 2 seasons in 24, 234 opposing average against, and he did better this past year, 231. He's a career 242 OBA, so he's hard to hit, and he's gotten better. So it's probably more a case that he's using it to his advantage and learning how to pitch more in his situation.
I will say what scares me the most is last season, his walk per 9 going up almost a full point in the he had a 3.4 walks per 9 last year. This is a league where you can't allow runners to get on base because of those power threats. Like we were talking about, we love guys who get on base. For pitchers, we hate guys who walk a lot of guys. I think that could also see him struggle to get assigned somewhere.
But you also see the potential that he could bring, as in 2023, he walked 1.1 per 9.
True.
So he has the potential to find that control again. But yeah, the most recent example is not the best.
Indeed. Any further thoughts on Reed Foley before we move on? All right, here's one I'm curious about. He's still one of the best names in real life. Here, he's 37 years old. He's got some mileage on him. He's got a little bit of an injury history. He takes a flyer on Jake DeGrom.
His injury proneness scares me. That's my first thought. Like, he's been injured quite a bit over the past few seasons.
But he did go 31 games. He had 170 innings pitched this past year, so he at least was a useful part for Tom and the Angels this past year. Strikeouts are definitely down from where they've been, but he also kept the walks back to where he was, even better than where he was prior to his injuries.
I will say I think a contending team might take a flyer on him as the back end of the rotation guy because his contract demand is so reasonable. Because he's at this age 37 season, he's not asking for much. He just doesn't want to retire yet. And you can take this kind of production at the back end of your rotation any day, especially for the price that he's asking for.
Yeah, I could easily see a team like the Tigers, as a consolation prize if they're not able to bring back Fran Berbaldez, could easily be that they go after somebody like a DeGrom, to kind of fill in at the back end for them.
I think you throw a different name in the AL Central out there, and I don't know why, but Kansas City seems like a spot where he could end up. A flyer guy, not expensive, would fit Kansas City's mold great. He just seems like a guy who would fit in a ballpark like Kansas City.
So 4 years and $18 million is what you're saying is the final deal in Casey? Hi, Minerva.
Yeah. No, his price tag tells me that a small budget team is going to really want him. And I think while the big budget teams are busy going after Valdez, a small budget team is going to swoop in and grab DeGrom.
I think we could see him do what Garrett Cole is doing in New York with the Mets in a spot like Tampa.
I could see Charles liking a player like that.
A Tampa, a Seattle, a Philadelphia, even a Andrew. I'm gonna say it, even a St. Louis Cardinals spot. I mean,
we struggled at the back of our rotation this year. So.
He could be a great long reliever, middle inning, even a high leverage guy, or he could eat innings. He could do both.
I will say I'm not a low budget team though.
I didn't say it had to be low budget.
Yeah.
I just said it's a spot.
I agree.
That's fair.
He would look good in red.
Cincinnati red?
Ooh.
All right, let's have a little fun here. Any other starter you want to quickly talk about before we go over to a couple of closers and wrap up?
Do you want someone who is actually a starter or someone who's listed as a starter in free agency?
Let's go with someone who's hoping to be a starter, most likely.
You know exactly.
I know who you want to talk about.
How about a name who was thrown out in trade talks all of last season? Jose Barrios.
Jose Barrios, indeed, yeah.
Where does he end up? I think OOTP 23 hurt him and hurt his chances.
I think his play last year hurt his chances.
Yeah, I mean,
he's been steadily declining.
Yeah, he has been. He's still a mid-90s thrower. He still has a decent work ethic. Of course, we understand that movement is different now, and out of the park 23, we'll see how that affects him, and that's his weakest rating, although still average at best. So, Barrios could be an interesting one to see where he lands. It doesn't sound like he's asking for a lot of money, but again, is he a low risk, high reward type of potential player, I guess?
With that contract, yeah, low risk. Comparing Barrios to DeGrom, I think DeGrom has better potential to give you a better season. But Barrios could find his form again.
And I think for a team, if you miss out on DeGrom, you'd be happy going and trying to sign Barrios.
Agreed.
Send him to San Francisco. Let him pitch in a pitcher-friendly ballpark.
All right.
Another name on there, Joe Musgrove. I think Joe Musgrove is I think of the low-cost starting pitchers, he might be the best option based on his previous performance.
Musgrove has been pretty impressive over the last couple of seasons, at least in regards to his overall. I mean, he almost had 2 straight 200 innings pitched years. He keeps the walks down. His walk per 9 was 2.2. Not a strikeout guy, but also can keep the ball in the park. And in a place like T-Mobile last year, that was important that he kept it under 30 home runs with as many innings as he pitches. So I think that's a good call. He's your budget rent-a-car specialty that can pitch pretty much everywhere, I would assume. He's not going to wow you, but yeah, I
know we make fun of him, but Kansas City makes sense for a Joe Musgrove type. Kansas City makes a lot of sense, and he's asking for a reasonable demand, so hopefully Minerva learns from his mistakes. He's not Nathan Eovaldi. He is not he's not Kyle Hendricks. He's a guy who can eat innings for you at what his contract demand is, at least according to what I see, at $7 million a year. Why not take a 1-year $7 million and allow your prospects to still develop, your starting pitching prospects, one more year while you're sort of still in contention, but also he's got the pedigree to eat a lot of innings. Very similar to how I saw the Rich Hill signing in Tampa Bay in real life last year.
We forget to mention the absolute best thing about Joe Musgrove is that his personality is described as an average Joe.
Oh, yes. I was going to say that, but I didn't want to drop a dad joke in the middle of you guys.
How many have you already dropped today?
I don't think he has yet.
I think Brendan brought him up just to be able to drop that fact on us.
I absolutely did.
I think he did, for sure.
Fun fact, he's an average Joe. Nice job. Good word. All right.
So, well, I do want to highlight 2 players at the same time, and they have the same reason why I want to highlight them. And that are players that were used primarily as relievers last year who have now entered the free agent market listed as starting pitchers. And Commissioner already knows about one. That's from my team, Johnny Lasagna, Jonathan Loaisiga, who was a very key part of the Cardinals' elite bullpen last year. But he's entered the free agent market as a starting pitcher, and I didn't change his position. That changed after he was released off of my team. And then another guy of the same mold, my I-70 rival, Clay Holmes from Kansas City, is also now listed as a starting pitcher after spending the season as Kansas City's primary closer.
36 saves last year for the Royals.
So the interesting thing would be, do teams target these guys as starters, or are teams going to target these guys as relievers? And now that I see that Loaisiga is listed as a starter, I understand why he was asking for the money he was asking for, because he was asking for higher contracts than my extension for Leclerc. And I was like, why are you asking for this much money as a reliever? Now I know why. It's because he's looking to be signed as a starter. And I'm interested to see if a team is going to give him that kind of starting pitcher money. Because in the past, I used him as spot starter. It was my primary reliever all in the bullpen last year. But in the past, when I had injuries to starting pitchers, I would plug in Loaisiga as a starting pitcher until I got the injury guy back. And he did pretty well in that kind of swingman role. So I'm interested for your guys' take to ask, where do you guys think he's going to end up?
I really worry because he's asking for so much money and just does not have any history at starting. You don't know how he's going to do. It's a big, big, big gamble.
Yeah, it's been 3 seasons since he last was a starter at any part for the Cardinals. So, yeah, I mean, he's got good mileage in regards to what he's done. But absolutely, if he's trying to pitch that he is still a starter, this is a Janet Jackson world. What have you done for me lately? And he hasn't really done anything to earn that credo. So that's a good point.
I would just like to say we're on fire with the music references this evening. We're really just clicking on all cylinders, you know. We're just firing away. It's great. We're hitting y'all with your best shot. I'm sorry. But I think that both of them, what hurts the both of them is that they're asking for starter money and have compensation attached to them. That these are two guys who are going to go unsigned. These are two guys who aren't going to end up on teams until that compensation goes away. And when they do, they will be relievers. They will not be starters. They're not starters.
And actually, that was kind of one of my evaluations when I was on the fence as to whether or not to offer Loaizica the qualifying offer, because I was like, do I want to risk him signing that qualifying offer like happened with me with Goldschmidt last year? Goldschmidt was asking for an over $20 million extension. I wasn't willing to give him that. I offered them the qualifying offer, which is what, 15.2 million, and he took that. And I was very confused. I was like, do I want to risk that with Loaizica again? But then I looked at Loaizica's production out of the bullpen and thought, okay, for a younger guy who is a very key part of my bullpen, I can stomach paying him the same amount of money as Leclerc for one season. So that's why I ended up offering him the qualifying offer. The interesting thing will be, will someone else take him up on what he's asking for?
I think Johnny Lasagna goes before Clay Holmes does.
Oh yeah.
I think he's more valuable than Holmes. Yeah.
I'd agree. And and Andrew, I'm going to be completely honest with you. I think he resigns with you. I think you realize how much of a value he is at the beginning of the season and how much you rely on him, that you're going to feel the need to re-sign him.
Okay.
Yeah, I think somebody's going to give him a good deal as a starting pitcher. I mean, I think the fact that, you know, he's got really good stuff and he's an extreme ground ball guy. I think there's going to be somebody out there, or maybe one or two teams, that are willing to give him that money, you know, and knowing that there really aren't a ton of, you know, really good starting pitching options out there in this free agent market. So I think you're going to have a lot of teams in on Framber Valdez, and then you're going to have them, you know, the teams that lose out still want to add somebody, and a guy like Loaizica is going to benefit from that.
Blue Jays or White Sox? And Cubs.
I will. Oh gosh, if he goes to the Cubs,
I think the Cubs will go after him.
I was literally about to say I wanted to re-sign him because he's been such a key part of my bullpen for multiple seasons. Like, he's been consistent production in my bullpen, but I just couldn't stomach the 22 million that he was asking for.
Well, Brendan beat me to the punch. I was just going to say Loaizica to the Reds confirmed, but
the Reds I can handle a little bit more.
Yeah, it just sounded like that. JR was like, you know, a little bit of trying to read between the lines here. Let's transition to some closers here. Let's start with the most effective closer this past year, or at least by the amount of saves that he did. The former Philly, gonna say Will Smith. He's 36, but if there's anything that's been proven, these guys can still do it at an advanced age. So Will Smith, I'll throw it out to the floor.
All right, who's gonna slap down the money for this one?
All right, you know what? I'll take this one. I think he fits greatly, and he's gonna head back home and become the Fresh Prince once again, and he's gonna head over back to one of the two LA teams. I think it just makes too much sense for Tom to sign him.
I thought you were lining up to go back to Philadelphia.
Yeah, I was.
No, I don't think it
sounded like you were lining up for.
No, I think he goes. I think his mama realizes he needs to go to Bel Air, and he heads over to Bel Air and joins forces with Tom over in LA.
Tom has a penchant for having nothing but closers in his in the bullpen, so it's not a bad thought to consider. So
I think the perfect fit for him is the Nationals. I mean, now whether or not Pirate wants to spend the money, but a short-term deal for him to really hold down that back end of the bullpen for them as they go to try to repeat, I think that is a perfect fit. You know, or, you know, another big contending team like Baltimore or the Red Sox. You know, those two teams I think could really benefit from having him at the back end of their bullpen, you know, as a kind of a finishing piece there as well.
I think given Washington's bullpen struggles, I think that they would be happy forfeiting the money they could use to go bring Robles back and go get Will Smith.
Will
Where is
Smith will cause a lot less heart attacks than Andrew Dahlquist will most likely.
Yeah, where's the Michael Smith no God please no button? Get him out of the NL East. I want him as far away from the NL East. That's why I said
Get him
Tom.
yourself.
I want to put him in the AL West.
Oh my
No, God! I don't know if I agree with the Nationals because I think the Nationals want to target a more high-level right-handed reliever because isn't Dahlquist a lefty?
Dahlquist is I think he's a righty.
I thought for some reason he's a lefty. Maybe I'm mixing him up with.
Dahlquist is already.
Okay, I think I'm mixing him up with Andrew James in Colorado.
Yeah,
a different Andrew. Never mind. Will Smith fits in the Nationals. Sorry, Aiden. Basically the lefty complement to Dahlquist. Then. I thought Dahlquist was a lefty for some reason.
Jake just says, "What if I bring him into the NL Central?" So, what if the Cubs do bring him to the Central?
What if I bring him to the NL Central?
Ooh.
What if JR brings him to the NL Central?
I don't think JR's going to do that.
I don't think JR's going to throw that money at a reliever.
He just got Hicks. I think he's fine.
Sorry, I just felt like playing along there. It felt like too good of an
What if Jay Hill brings him to the NL Central?
Well, let's talk about a guy that JR did have. Would JR think of bringing Curtis Taylor back?
I would not think of bringing Curtis Taylor back again, just since I had Hicks. I think he's the type of guy though who again, I don't know that he's necessarily a real closer type, but as a setup guy, again, I think a team like a Washington or a Boston, maybe even a Milwaukee, would be a good fit for him. Trying to fit in there. I know he did okay for Brendan, I think after he came over, but definitely did not fit as a closer really for either one of us.
I go back to the old Kmart commercial. When we got Curtis Taylor, he shipped the bed. He was awful. He got left off the playoff roster.
Oh, really?
Wow.
You're muted.
That's right. Now that you mention it, he was kept off the playoff roster. His ERA was more than a run higher than it was in Cincinnati, and you would have thought the alternative, leaving the launching pad that is the Great American Ballpark. So,
I was about to point out that I think that's why JR doesn't bring him back is because the extreme fly ball rate of Taylor does not fit well in Cincinnati.
Okay. Good point. Very good point.
Can I hop in here real quick?
Go for it.
I know I've said this team a lot, but it feels like this might be the one piece that San Francisco needs to put them over the top in the sense of an extreme fly ball guy in a park that doesn't allow many home runs. It seems like a good fit. And it also, for me, I think that if I was who I am, which hold on, sorry.
It's not like we're talking right now.
My headphones unplugged, so I apologize. But for me, I also think that if I was to think about it, he wouldn't suck in Atlanta. But I will be honest and say his signability is not likely for Atlanta.
I think he might go back to where he started in Tampa.
That's a good spot too.
I will say, I mean, I don't want to give away my plans, but he might fit well in St. Louis too, because St. Louis is a pitcher's park. I mean, it's one of the reasons why I went out and got Jonathan Stieber, though that didn't work out very well.
He kept giving home runs there too.
No, he really didn't give up home runs. He gave up a lot of doubles.
All right. A few more, not many more players that we'll look at, but one guy caught my eye. He's been here before. He just reestablished himself, at least this past year, as a closer for the Mariners. 100-mile Kenny Giles. Maybe he won't be sought after to be a closer this go-around. He's been just as effective as a reliever. We saw that amazing 2023 season he had with the Diamondbacks, just an ERA of 0.5 in 35 innings of work, whip under 1. This past year, 24 saves, 2.53 ERA. So where does a 35-year-old from that hotbed Yavapai College go?
He is a interesting player in the sense of I don't know where he goes. There are 3 teams that come to mind. one in the West, one in the Central, one in the East. Seattle Mariners, Minnesota Twins, and the New York Mets. I think all three of those could be a good spot, and I'll even throw Philadelphia in there because they are probably going to lose Will Smith.
It'd be cheaper too, so you think you'll see a lot of guys going after him because of the value.
Yeah. The problem is, though, is you're not going to bring in Ken Giles to be that veteran mentor because of his outspoken personality. You would want a team that has already a solid core in the clubhouse with a high chemistry before you think about bringing in a player like Giles.
That's a good point.
Now, I don't know what teams already have a good chemistry. I know what my team is. I don't really look at other teams' chemistry. I think a team that has an established locker room is going to be the one that takes the flyer on him.
All right. I'm going to throw a guy out here because we talked about him a lot. He's a three-time world champion, technically. But did not win this particular year. The lefty, the nightmare, Felipe Vasquez, now 34 years old, but has always been pretty effective. You got to think a guy that throws still north of 100, throws from the side, throws a curveball, fastball, curveball, slider, changeup combo as a reliever can be highly effective, and he did prove that again this year. So you got to think Vasquez will be in high demand, even if he's not a closer type. So what's your thoughts? Where does he go?
I mean, this again is where eMLB and real life may blend, but I hope no one signs him. To be completely honest with you, I mean, I'm not going to get into it why, but I know eMLB and in real life are different, but the fact that, I know it's completely different, but the fact that his name is even still mentioned kind of hurts the fact, of what happened. But I think if he goes anywhere, I can't even give you a spot.
Fair enough. Atlanta.
He likes to do crosswords in his spare time.
It's a smoke screen.
I mean, Boston. Boston again is another spot where, on the pitching side, I if I'm Billy, getting into this offseason, I know I have plenty of offense everywhere, and I'm a team that has money. I mean, there's, you add a couple of really solid relievers to that team and one other more solid pitcher. I mean, that could be enough to make you a World Series champion with that offense. So, there's plenty of these really talented relievers that, you splurge a little bit and get two of those guys to really hammer home the back end there. And maybe you pick up, a Sean Reed Foley or what have you, if you don't go after a Fran Berbaldez, and that's enough to make it work with that offense.
Gotcha. Very good. All right. Why don't we finish up here, and I'll let, if any of you want to talk about at least one more player from each of you, we can take a quick peek at them, at least in the reliever front.
All right, here's an interesting question. I'll make it a little bit more specific. There have been some posted players from international teams. Do you think any of them are going to gauge any interest, considering you have to sign them to a contract and pay the posting fee? Because there's some decent players. There's a couple of decent players.
In my opinion, there's only one or maybe three who would even be worth looking at and talking about. I think obviously pardon me. Wow, I was looking at just relievers again. Again, still only three players who I think are really worth anything like that, and
they all have the same last name.
Kim. They all have the same last name of Kim.
It's going to be Padres.
What's that?
They're going to go to the Padres, all three of them.
Yeah.
Just get a team of Kims out in San Diego.
San Diego Kims.
I think the most intriguing one is Shi-Hoon Kim. However, he's a two-pitch pitcher, doesn't throw hard, and is a fly ball pitcher, and doesn't have a whole lot of control. It's very scary. Perfect for Petco. I think similar situation, except more control with young Ha Kim. And I think Hoyun Kim is a little more interesting to me just because his slider, according to OSA, is 17. However, I don't really think any of them get many traction, and in 2-3 years, we won't be talking about any of these guys as guys who broke the bank as international guys, like a guy like Shohei Ohtani or Seiya Suzuki.
Yeah, I would agree. I think if they had been able to become regular free agents instead of being posted by teams, they would definitely find some landing spots. But having to sign them to a contract plus pay the posting fee, I think might be too steep for most teams.
Meanwhile, I'm going to do my best to make sure that Steve Kim has not hacked into the file and has not just added a bunch of Kims to the league. So,
hey, at least he's doing it.
And Aaron said in the chat, "Hey, Song is staying in Arizona. Thank you very much."
All right. Any further final thoughts here?
I think this offseason is going to be and it's already started, the offseason of the trade.
The offseason of the Braves trades.
Well,
not the Braves. No.
We've already made 2. Be quiet. I agree with that because of the fact that this is an offseason with not a very strong free agent class. There is no, I think, like Brendan mentioned it best, there's one player out there that's worth the star money. And I agree with that sentiment. I don't think there are any star players that are going to turn the tide of any franchises that are looking to make that World Series run. I think the biggest moves, and we've already seen a bunch of them, the biggest moves are going to come with trades.
All right, outside of Verdugo or Ramirez, who is going to be the biggest player move this offseason?
What are some players on the trade block? I don't know off the top of my head.
Hey, Taylor Trammell.
Ooh.
If I didn't have a established outfield, I'd be calling.
Well, Denver just said phone lines are open, so
Maybe Escalona.
Pete Alonso.
Denver's rolling his eyes now.
The polar bear?
Oh.
Maybe.
He
No.
said
No.
He says no.
He says no. So
Lines are closed.
Hey, anyone has a price, right? Everyone has a price.
Hey, that's something I have said multiple times.
And that's Baltimore's mantra.
Everyone. You know what? I'm going to say the biggest name moved is Buster Bluth.
I just gave him an extension for 8 years.
Doesn't
did?
mean he doesn't have a price.
When was that going to be announced?
Oh, that was like, I don't know, three real life weeks ago.
Oh, was that before we hit free agency?
Yeah.
I must have just missed it. Never mind.
A couple other players in the Orioles roster, though.
All right, then let me also ask this. Who's going to sign the biggest extension this offseason?
We already had it. Bluth.
Yeah, maybe.
Now, just kind of clarifying question for Kamish. Do these contract extensions, are they now set for like the 4 for 2026 or the 4 for 2025?
Anything since we're officially on the day that we became entered free agency right now, anything after this point is considered your 4 for 26. Anything was for prior.
So Brendan got in under the wire there.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Very good. Well, gentlemen, I appreciate your time and energy. It was a lot of fun. For those of you who are watching, we brought in our friends from Here's Why You're Wrong, Aiden Pearson and Brendan McGurk, as well as our friends from the eMLB Insider Podcast, Jared Rollins and Andrew Alexander. Guys, thank you very much. It was a lot of fun. Enjoyed all of this. We absolutely do need to do stuff like this again, and we'll get to doing it soon enough. But of course, for those of you who watch regularly, you can see their content that they put on our YouTube channel. So if you are not a member of our YouTube eMLB Baseball Universe channel, please go ahead and hit that button. Thank you, Andrew, for doing that, so that you can follow their content that they do over there. But for myself, we're going to call it a night. COVID is finally catching up. Back to the litter box I go. Fluffy Kitty Ninjas do assassinate, and you're looking at their victim. So next time I can find some glue and tape, I'll put the head back on straight. We'll be back in front of you. We don't know officially when that will be. We're working on that, but right after this sim is done, or right after I go offline, I will advance 4 days, and we will send a file out for everybody to get started on the season. Tomorrow will be discussion on Winter League in the Discord, as well as no signings because I haven't even simmed officially yet, but we will officially start talking Winter League, and I will introduce the stadiums that we will use for Mexico so teams can choose that tomorrow. So again, thanks to all of you for being here. We are going to call it a night. We'll see you soon. Remember, how you think directs your life. When you think your best, you're going to be your best. So please go and do your best. We'll see you soon. Have a great one.